everyone. Welcome to the Horror Room. I'm Travis Bruce, and today I'm going to shine a spotlight on another horror YouTuber. Today I have Micah with us. She is a licensed therapist, and she has an excellent show that I actually enjoy. Micah's Horror Hysteria. Micah, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thank you for coming on.
hmm No problem.
So tell everybody about your show.
Um, so on my channel, I decided that I wanted to combine what I do professionally with my pastimes, like what I really enjoy, and big horror fan. So I decided that after spending a little bit of time, I think I was playing a horror survival video game. Actually, when the idea came to me, now that I'm thinking about it. Um,
Nice.
yeah, I was playing Visage, um, and I was thinking about it because in like part of that game they take like pills to fix the insanity or whatever. And as a therapist, like looking at that, I started thinking about the different themes in horror that were related to mental health, and there's so many of them that I was like, I could do something with this. So I originally was going to do a blog, but I got bored with it and didn't want to do it anymore. So so I switched to YouTube.
Awesome, awesome. So let's jump into it.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a character and give me what you think.
Okay.
Art the Clown from the
Um,
Terrified series.
Art is one of my personal favorites. I actually, if the lighting was better over there, I could show you. I have like this signed picture of him over there that I got from David Howard Thornton at the Fright Film Fest in Louisville, Kentucky. And it was actually before Terrifier 2 came out, so he wasn't like quite as exploded, I guess now as it. And it's actually I met Damien and David, and so I'm all about Art the Clown. I think that he's one of the next really big ones in the like in the group of horror villains, I guess.
So, if you had to analyze him, what's going on with Art?
So I really should have included that in my one about Sienna because I included like therapy for her and talked
Hmm.
about like her trauma, but I didn't actually look at Art very much. So that's he. If we take like the supernatural component out of it,
Yeah.
um, absolutely what is known as a psychopath, but in my world, in the clinical world, that's antisocial personality disorder. Um, I mean, he could fall into some very interesting other categories, maybe some kind of schizoaffective, because, I mean, in Terrifier 2, we see the hallucinations potentially. Um, but yeah, he's definitely disconnected from reality if he was a human, like for sure, but who
Hmm.
knows?
Okay. Now, do you think a lot of the iconic horror characters, as be Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger, do you think they have mommy issues,
Yes.
quote unquote?
They do. Actually, that is something that I was sitting and thinking. I saw like a copy of my Freddy's Nightmares like DVD that I have sitting on next to my TV, and I was like, how can I do Freddy Krueger besides like maybe I think it's the third one that's the Dream Warriors. Is
Yeah.
that when they're in
Mhm.
the facility? And so I was thinking about that, but that's a good thing to kind of expand on because yeah, Freddy Krueger absolutely has mommy issues, and so does Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. Yep, I see
I
it.
mean, Norman Bates, I mean, definitely
Yep.
mommy issues. Leatherface, I mean,
No, and that's common amongst serial killers as well. I'm actually working on a second master's degree in forensic psychology, and so I'm all about some true crime stuff too. But yeah, no, a whole lot of psychopathic people that fall into that like cluster B personality disorder realm um, have mother issues and have like trauma associated with their moms.
So with those characters, none of those characters, their fathers were present. I'm trying to think. Do you think that has something to do with it? Not having, or even when it comes to serial killers, not having a male presence growing
Absolutely.
up?
Yeah, absolutely. And not to say that, there has to be a male presence, but I think that there has to be more than just one important adult in a child's life. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a dad, or it has to be um, a man, or it could be two grandparents that are the caregivers that are providing that support. I think it just has a lot to do with both people parenting, and oftentimes in those situations you see like this abuse situation where, even when I look back at like true crime stuff, and what I know in my practice is, oftentimes it's either the father or the mother, honestly, that can be very abusive, and whoever is abusive, usually the opposite parent, is more passive and kind of allows it to happen, if the dynamic stays together. But sometimes they split up and a child gets put with the abusive parent primarily, and so that creates a ton of issues. I mean, it doesn't mean that you're gonna be a serial killer at all, because I think like so many people fit into this, myself included. It's one of those things that, like, it's you know there's more to it, but yeah, absolutely.
Because I saw a stat. It said that especially boys who are raised by primary single mothers are 70% likely to go into a life of crime.
Yep.
And that's something that you've seen as well.
Yeah, I've learned about that along the way in some of my more like sociology based courses. I think it has a lot to do with poverty. I think that that's the primary culprit there. I mean, of course, having a positive balance of, um, I guess, people that complement each other. Maybe one person's a little more of a disciplinarian and the other person's just a little bit more emotionally in tune. If you have that balance there, um, then it creates a much more safer environment for a child. But if one of those is gone, and let's say it's just one parent who's quite passive, so they're not abusive, they're not negligent, um, but they feel bad because they don't have the other parent, they don't have a dad, or they have to work so hard, they have to work multiple jobs, and they don't have a lot because they're probably living in poverty. Um, that has like horrible outcomes on children, and especially males. Um, and in my community, African American males are most subject to it, but that's also a poverty thing. I mean, it goes
Mhm.
deep. It goes really deep.
It does. Now, as a therapist, is
Mhm.
there a horror icon that you've seen and you were like, wow, I would love to work with this individual? Like, this individual would be fascinating to work with.
Hmm. That's a good question because I guess with your traditional horror icons, like, I mean, the ones that are more on the less like, we have like your natural kind of villains that are like this
Mhm.
could happen, versus the ones that have the supernatural things
Yes.
going on. So if I'm looking at the supernatural ones, I haven't thought about it a whole lot. I need to get to that. There's a little bit there that I've thought about, but there's not one that stands out above the others. But in the realm of like horror that is based on people and what people do to other people, oh, absolutely. Uh, Let me think. I'm Jack in the house that Jack built. It's Lars von Trier movie, and it's something. I have a video coming out about it soon, but he is a psychopath, um, has narcissistic personality disorder, has OCD, and he just kind of sucks. Like, his personality's just terrible, but he's really interesting. And so that's probably number one on my list right now because I'm kind of in the midst of it.
And with some, I mean, I don't know if it's just me, but like with some of the horror, characters. I guess the Jasons. I kind of feel sorry for them in some ways because you look at the environment where they grew up. More than likely, they had an overbearing parent that shut them off from the rest of the world, or they had an abusive parent, or that just was in a bad situation, like Michael Myers, where he had a stepfather who was abusive and verbally abusive, and you kind of feel sorry for them because they're getting hit with this at a young age, and then it spirals the older they get to violence, and even in my own personal life, I've seen that, and it's kind of you feel kind of sad for some of these individuals as a horror movie fanatic. You don't feel sad that they're out there killing people, but for them to get to the point where they're at, a lot happened at a young age, and some things that a child's not supposed to go through.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's 100%. I see it in the more fictional based horror. I see it in true crime. I see it like just universally, like a lot of people end up in some places where they didn't seem to really have a chance because of some things that happened to them. So you do feel bad for them. But like you said, of course, there's some choice there, because I've absolutely met people with some traits along these lines that are more like antisocial, that would fall in the psychopath range. They're more on the mild end of the spectrum. So they're very much like, I have all these thoughts and I wouldn't care if I did this thing, but I know I would get in trouble, and I know that I couldn't be around things I do like and people I do like, so I don't do it. So that's like a thing that I think about, is like the extremes of the spectrum of psychopathy, I guess you could say. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's always a story behind it.
And I don't want to give it away because I want people to come to your channel and watch it. Yeah. Your recent video, one of your recent photos you did, if you were Laurie Strode's therapist, just hit on the cliff notes. What would you do if you were Laurie Strode's therapist?
So if I was Laurie Strode's therapist, if I kind of cut out I hit my desk, I apologize. If I cut out kind of the parts where I just talk about the movie and just look at her as a person individually, she needs some therapy for sure. I mean, regardless of which timeline and which version, like she's been through some stuff, and she needs to like get her nervous system calmed down. And what happens when you have a lot of trauma like that is your nervous system becomes overactive, and it reacts very strongly to reminders. And so we see some examples of that in lots of franchises where there's a final girl who is in sequels where she's like, she has PTSD symptoms, honestly. I mean, so, and that would be Laurie. But also one thing that I think is interesting that isn't like an obvious thing, that would be important for Laurie in therapy would be her origins, basically. So when we in the timelines where she is the sister of Michael Myers, like she didn't know, and then now she's of this age and is like, what is going on? And that is very detrimental to people. So that's one of the things that I would want to look at too. And then also, all these people been dying around her, she's probably going to need some grief therapy as well.
I never understood why Laurie doesn't leave Haddonfield.
Right. Like, get out of there. Like,
I don't understand why anybody actually lives in Haddonfield at this point, but I mean,
right.
I mean, every Halloween some people are gonna die, so like that's when I would take a vacation for 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
So growing up, you were a horror fan, and it sounded like you were also a horror video game fan as well.
A little bit. I won't say that I'm like a hardcore gamer, because I'm a little bit on the amateur side. Okay. But I have played my fair share of them, I think, because I don't really like video games unless they're horror themed for the most part, or just like a darker theme, like some of like the Batman games I played a while back. But no, yeah, the first horror game I ever played probably wasn't some of the first ones that a lot of people played, but I was like 17 and I had a PSP and I played Silent Hill Origins, and I just like fell in love with horror survival and like that aspect. I was already into movies, of course, but I didn't grow up with like gaming consoles and stuff like that. So that was when someone else that I lived with had one, and I was like, oh my god, and it scared me so bad. Like I'm so terrible. I get so scared when I play video games. I will just like yell and throw the controller, and it's bad.
The one game. So I'm a huge horror fan. I mean, a horror video game fan. Even though I haven't played one in years, a couple years, but huge Resident Evil fan. Had the first one in Silent Hill games and all that good stuff. And but they made Resident Evil Biohazard, and it was two Resident Evils ago, and I played that game and it scared the shit out of me. Like it, like, and I've beaten every Resident Evil game up to this point. I could not finish that game because it was just too much. It's like you were actually in a horror movie, and I was like, yeah, this is too extreme for me.
See, my amateur gamer status hurts me in the areas like that because I'm scared. That is the only thing that scares me. Like movies very rarely scare me. I'm so desensitized that like it takes a lot for me to actually be like, oh my god, like and start thinking like, is there something that's going to get me when I run up the stairs tonight? Like, but video games will do it, and I think it's just more immersive for me, and so I can play something relatively tame in some areas and still be pretty scared. I mean, I think most recently I played Resident Evil Village, and that whole first part in the castle, I was like, oh my god, what's going on?
Yeah, I didn't play that one. That's the sequel to the one I'm talking about. I haven't even gotten to that one. I'm like, if I can't make it through this one, I mean, that's. Yeah. So, growing up, what was your favorite horror series?
Interestingly enough, my experience with horror was odd. So it was like back when you had cable and you had like, I don't know, like 30 something channels, maybe. I don't know. And I didn't have a remote control because I lost it. And so I would like sit up against the TV, hitting the button and going up through the channels. And I would catch like Hellraiser. And so like the made for TV versions of the horror. And then there was Sci-Fi Channel. And so it would have some stuff sometimes. And then at my dad's house, he had satellites. So they had Chiller. And so I would watch the marathons and different movies on there. But really early in life, I was like scared of everything. So it was like a very strange thing to a lot of people that I started to like horror as I got older, I think. But I think I've done a lot of like looking into it because of me, and I'm an anxious person. I'm fairly sensitive. It seems like horror stuff would be too much, but I've looked into it and learned that it's almost my own way of desensitizing myself to things that are scary. It's this urge that your brain has to learn as much about this scary thing or this morbid thing or whatever it is so that it can study it and learn as much about it as possible so that it can avoid possibly getting to that. And it's like some weird instinctual thing. So anyway, I went off on like a little side note there.
But it's true. I mean, if you watch horror movies, it tells you what not to do in life. It really does. It is the guide on what not to do in life, what to stay away from. Like no one should pick up hitchhikers.
Right. Right? Oh my gosh, that's like a huge one. Don't ever hitchhike. Don't pick up hitchhikers. Just no.
Mm-hmm. I remember like this was a couple months ago. I was at a gas station and it was a couple, and they definitely looked like killers. And it was like, hey, dude, can we get a ride? They're like hippie killers, you know. I was like, no, I'm good. I'm heading to work. And some young white dude pulled up and he was like, yeah, hop on in. I was like, he is going to be dead.
It's a white dude.
Some white dudes just don't care. There's no fear. Okay.
No fear.
Come on in, crazy people.
The only people I've known, it's been white dudes that have given rides. No hate on white dudes. Like I'm
no. I can wait these props because you guys got balls. I don't have. All right, so on my show every Thursday I do a Women of Horror Spotlight.
Okay.
And there's so many women who are getting into the horror industry, acting, directing, producing, writing novels. How do you feel about that? Are you excited by that as a woman?
Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like horror has had an odd relationship with women, just always. Not to say that it's good or bad, or that it's one way or the other. I think it's very balanced in a strange way. So like we have the final girl trope, and that's a more empowering kind of role. Usually they are dealing with the consequences of that or whatever, but that's a very empowering role. And when that emerged, it kind of shifted, along with the current political spectrum that was going on during the time, like the 70s and the 80s. And so I feel like horror's had a weird relationship with women. It's pretty neutral in my opinion, but sometimes you go in a hard direction over here where it's showing more of, again, what is reality, that women are subjected to more violence. And so in horror movies, unfortunately, that might be reflected. And I think sometimes people get like, oh no, horror's like horror and death metal and all that's very, very bad to women. And I get what they mean, but it's like a reflection of what kind of things already happen, kind of. But I do like that women are getting involved more, because I think that women see things from a different perspective sometimes, not universally. And not to say that men can't create something that is amazing, because they absolutely can, very emotional and kind of in tune with people and individuals, is really good emotional vibes, I guess. They absolutely can, but I imagine I would see some more of that from women. Or we might just see, I don't know, I mean, women can write some pretty intense stuff too, so who knows. But I just think the perspective is a little different. So yeah, I am excited about it.
Like recently, I interviewed a husband and wife horror movie directing couple, and like I did not know that his wife was the co-director. I just watched one of his movies, and I'm watching. I'm like, okay, this movie has a woman's touch to it. You know what I mean? I was just like, this woman. I was like, that's interesting. And then when I got ready for the interview, his wife popped in and said, "Oh, by the way, I'm the co-director." I was like, "That's where it's at."
Yeah.
And because I feel like when it's a male horror director, there is a little bit of misogynist, like where as a woman, you're like, boy, no woman acts or talks like that. And then when you have a woman who is a horror movie director, you're like, wait a minute, no man acts or talks like that. So when you have like both of them together, it's a nice little balance.
Yeah, no, that is a really good idea, to have kind of the balance there between the two sides of the spectrum. I could see that. I'm gonna be like watching that and looking out for that more now.
Yeah, because I was like watching that because yeah, I can definitely tell if you put a horror movie in front of me and you don't tell me who directed the movie, I can tell if it's a man or a woman. It's just how the opposite sex carries themselves, and it's a little off.
Yeah, no, there is a difference, and I appreciate like both sides very much. So there's some movies that you're like, this was 100% a man only thinking about men. And that's, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's
Not at all.
It has cinematic value, but we need balance as well, even if that is just a whole different movie that's way on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I watched one. I was like, oh, the woman director, because the man was crying about getting her pregnant or something. It was something like, oh, no man acts like that or talks like that, or like he said something like, well, I know that you're ovulating because I know your hormone menstrual cycle. No man knows that A, and no man says that B. And I was like, oh, a woman directed this movie.
Yeah. No, I would have picked up on that really quick and been like,
I was like, that's
Odd.
weird. No man knows that or says that. Well, Micah, where can everyone find you?
I am at Micah, Myka. Micah's Horror Hysteria on YouTube. There's like, I don't know, there's a couple other places that have a similar name, but mine has the Micah in front of it.
I'm gonna put it in my description. So
Okay,
look in
cool.
the links in my description. And social media wise?
I have links to my social media on my YouTube banner because
Okay,
I think that they're all like different things, so it's just easier to direct everybody
just go
there.
right to that link.
Mhm.
Well, guys, ladies and guys, please go ahead and take a look at her channel. Some great stuff there. One of my favorites. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button for her as well. All right. Well, thank you for coming on once again. I look forward to more content from you in the future.
Great. Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you for coming to the Horror Rim. I'm Travis Bruce. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.